worship centers, should they open or not, and why not? In Ogun State, for instance, there is a perspective which they seem to be divided about in terms of those who want it to open and those who don't. So we have Mr. Shola Ojeusi here with us in the studios. He's a public affairs analyst. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Good morning.
And then we also have Right Reverend Samuel Ogundeji, who is a bishop of the Diocese of Egba West Church of Nigeria Anglican Community, joining us via Zoom from Abeokuta. And right there, we also see Imam Jibril Awal, missionary of Islamic Youth League, Abeokuta, also joining us via Zoom. Gentlemen, thank you all for coming on this morning. Let me start with you, Mr. Chelsea. What is the current position concerning worship centers?
The position remains the same in the sense that, this is not a matter of sentiment. The government, for instance, from my own understanding, is out to serve the people. Don't forget that those in government too are, if you look at their background, the governor is a Christian, the deputy is Muslim, and these are people with religious background. They believe in God. And ordinarily, they will not want to do anything to jeopardize the interest of people, because freedom of worship is very essential as part of human rights. But sometimes as a leader, there are specific things you'll have to take into consideration before you allow certain things to happen. You have to set aside sentiment when you are challenged by statistics on the ground. So the situation is, if you look at the statistics going by what has been happening, there is no let in the kind of, in terms of the infections. People still, and you have to understand, previously, I think as at, by yesterday, you're having almost about 57 new infections coming up from Ogun State daily.
Well, there was also a day within the past 1 week that Ogun State didn't record one case.
But you know what? Let me say this. Let me give an example. These are people who have studied the situation well. These people are met daily by experts in epidemiology, in anything that has to do with medicine. The governor is briefed daily. He understands what is going on in the centers. He gets the reports from different sections of the state. Okay. There are so many centers. And so, when you are challenged by the statistics, it's going to be very difficult for you to have to take decision with sentiment.
Okay, just hang on. Let's have Right Reverend Ogundeji respond to this. He says, look, you can't argue with statistics. Do you share that view that given the situation at the moment, there's no point opening?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. The issue of opening of worship centers has been a big one among worshipers, among Nigerians. And in the state in particular, it has generated a lot of controversy. Both Muslims and Christians having a say on whether we should open or not. But all said and done, two things are paramount. Government, generally, that is Nigeria, before the state government, decided to close down worship centers because of indication data at their disposal, which suggests that within the worship centers, the spread of the virus is predominant. And as a result of that, our government felt that to save life, people need to stay back at home, and that has been the order of the day. But in recent times, there have been pressure on the state government, more so when the PTF at the national level decided to give some conditionalities for the opening of worship centers. So the state government have been under immense pressure to open worship centers. And when that came up, both the Muslim and the Christian leadership, had meeting with the government, and the government decided to set up a committee that will go around some of these worship centers. It's a record that they visited, the four zones administratively, that is Ijebu, Egba, Niwa, and Remo. And then government is compiling the report. But from the other angle, the position of the Muslims on this issue is clear. Islam allows us to, consult experts when issues like these are on the table. And experts are to tell us whether we are to, what we are to do when it comes to the issue of health. The Quran told us, when you don't know, consult the expert. So the expert need to let us know what is happening. But generally all over the world, like in Saudi Arabia, we know that the statistics for the spread of the infection has been coming down. And even at that, a lot of guidelines have been put in place for worshippers. So if it's observable that the places of worship and various leaders at different levels can comply with the conditionalities of government, i.e., social distancing, cleaning the mosque regularly after each prayer, that is not affecting Muslims, face mask, washing of hands, and etc. Where the government can confirm and can get commitments from the faith leaders that this can be adhered to, they can hold on to these principles. Well, let the government open the worship centers. But where they cannot get commitment from the leaders of both faith on these conditionalities, which might eventually lead to a lot of fatalities in our community, then government should still hold on with the opening of worship centers because life is paramount. That is our belief.
Okay, just a moment. Let's bring in Reverend Ogundeji. Let's hope he can hear us now. Reverend Ogundeji, now from the figures, from what has been said, I mean, they say it's not safe given the fact that just 57 new cases at the moment, and so they need to keep a lead on that. Do you still think that worship centers should be open, if that's your view? Well, that doesn't seem to be working out at the moment. But because if they had set up a committee a couple of days ago, the state government, to see how they could go ahead and reopen, so why the vote fast?
Well, the government has to depend on facts. If you set up a committee, you have to get the result from that. The committee goes around to get facts, to get the statistics on the ground. But that is not out yet. And let me give you one thing we have to know. Even the World Council of Churches, if you go to their website, they've been saying this. They defer to health authorities like WHO and agencies set up by governments across the world. World Council of Churches has almost about 110 nations who are members. And they listen to what experts, like you said, that sometimes the religious bodies also have experts that advise them. And from the statistics, let me answer. From what is coming, if the World Council of Churches says defer, they also understand what it means. Mind you, the health authorities like WHO recognizes the relevance of the churches.
So is World Council of Churches, do they have members in Ogun States who are saying...
No, there are Nigerian churches that are members of the World Council.
Yeah, but this is a localized issue. State by state,
but you know
it
what?
differs.
What you're talking of localized, the pandemic is no longer a local thing. It's something that affects the whole world.
Yeah, but the states, the PTF did say that the states have got to take that responsibility, determine what they want to do.
And that responsibility is what I'm going to count on. It is the responsibility of the governor to know that it is not, when it is safe, he has the people at the back of his mind.
The argument a number of people are also having is, look, some other parts of the economy are open. Some other social engagements perhaps are also open. Transport, services are open in the middle of the week. Markets are open and stuff like that. And there are children at the markets as well. There are various people of various categories, various ages at the markets, and there are various kinds of markets. Anyway, they are open. So the argument a number of them might be pushing is, look, if the market can be open with little compliance with whatever or massive compliance as the case may be, what's worship centers
look at the issue of, there is what they call the chemistry of gathering. If you look at the market situation, it's open air. Look at the church's enclosed environment. The level of infection within the open areas and the enclosed environment are different.
But there are also, just one moment on that same market thing.
Yes.
There are also enclosed markets. There are malls, there are supermarkets and all of that that are
with
open.
specific rules. Let me give we are looking at, sometimes the churches will look at what is going on around the world. They will say, okay, at least, but in terms of the facilities that are available, let's take for instance, in the church like choirs, you have to use microphones. You have to, you share a lot of things in the church. You have to interact. You have to do, maybe you want to do offering, you dance around. There are certain dynamics of what goes on in the church.
That doesn't mean that what they've been doing before is what they will do when they reopen. Because you're suggesting that the markets are safer than the churches to reopen.
Well, by that time, I told you about the chemistry that is involved. It is safer in the market.
Chemistry notwithstanding, because if in the churches, if they used to have 10 and they decide to have 5 and they don't put on the air conditioning system and allow for ventilation, what's wrong with that?
One of the challenges I feel the government has is
if they do this, what would be wrong with that?
If they
comply with those items I just specified.
But also the government goes around to see, even there's still some people who violate the laws. If you go to some areas, you see some people going in.
They have law enforcement.
In the process of doing that, you have to look at a number of issues. The sensibilities of the people also matter. So it's better for you to nip it in the bud right from where you can manage it than for you to allow it to happen. Let me give you an example.
So there was
a time
in the churches it will happen.
Let me tell you, there was a time the government in some other countries decided to allow the churches to go ahead. But what happened later, the statistics of reinfections that came up later became so alarming that they had to clamp down again.
Let's check if we could get back to Reverend Ogudeji and see if that is sorted now. Reverend, are you there? Okay, well, we need to see how we can get him to. Let's hear what he's got to say, because, they've got a perspective on that, but we'll keep trying to see how we can sort that out. But if the market, is this another way, because there are those who believe that this may just be that this is government's way of admitting that we don't have capacity to enforce what transpires in the churches.
You know what? Sometimes you have to know your limitations. And responsibility demands that when you know your limitations, you have to look at areas of handling those limitations.
So government is limited.
What I'm saying is that if you try and enforce some things, the fallbacks in terms of the way people even respond to the way you are doing it.
So government is afraid of the backlash if they try to enforce this. That's why they're not opening.
It's not even, no, not the backlash.
So what's your point?
The idea is the health of the people. What may come as a backlash when the infections skyrocket.
But the backlash, the health of the people, is it not considered when the markets are open?
You know the point. The government look at
even in the transport sector, the buses are all cramped up.
Well, you can see now. It's also to tell you that that's another challenge the government is facing. They have given instructions, specific instructions to people that you have to limit the number. But definitely there will be people who flout such.
It would seem.
But it's still more manageable because of the level of crowd that you're going to have.
Given the number of vehicles, cars, buses, minibuses, big buses, if government cannot manage those ones that they pay, that pay them, some royalties, some licenses, some levies, what's the assurance that, that same thing is going to happen in the churches? Because the government has said that they are considering they make economic considerations in giving, attention to, the markets and all of that opening. But some would also argue that the spiritual and social considerations are equally important, which is one of the, gaps that the churches and other, religious centers are filling.
There are alternatives. Let me cite an example, like the Redeemed Christian Church of God. Pastor Adeboye has been imparting the message using other means of reaching out to the people.
It is also possible, it is also possible to have markets virtually. There are virtual markets.
No, you're talking
about people who do
our environment. There are certain things you can't do virtually. And, you have to look at the nature of the people. Well, in terms of the kind of people you have, they may not have the facility to be able to do the virtual things. And people, it's a matter of feeding.
So if
So
they
you
cannot
have to be able to
if
get
they cannot
access.
do
That's why
things
people
virtually,
cannot go to the malls.
if
that
they
we
cannot
have,
do things
because
virtually,
they don't have
just
the
one moment,
facilities
Mr.
to do what
Ojewi,
happened in-
just one
yes.
moment. If they cannot do some things virtually, like you're talking about them not being able to buy things virtually, why would you now force them to do church virtually or to do mosques virtually?
No, the point is, I've told you the dynamics, that it's from what has been looked into by the experts. It is easier to handle what is happening in the market than in the churches because of the nature of the enclosure. So it's better for people to do it when they have the facilities. For instance, look at, I told you of Pastor Adeboye. Look at even Pastor T.B. Joshua. He has been imparting, using the instrumentality of the television service that I have, Emmanuel TV. And he has been talking to so many people around the world. He's been doing the same thing, the message, using virtual services. So you see people from all over the world coming, talking on television. So it has been
You still
placed
haven't
on
been able to persuade me, and I don't know how many people you have been able to persuade out there. Look, if markets are open physically, the transport system is open physically, and open markets and closed markets are open physically, what is wrong with other social environments which can be regulated, which are being regulated? What is wrong with government opening them and policing them?
You know, they look at the regulation, and that's why we just said earlier that a panel was set up to look at the current dynamics. But there has not been a kind of final decision on the desirability of the government opening the churches. So they have to look at what they have on the ground, the facts on the ground. And when they look at it, if the situation demands that, okay, they can go ahead. I believe the governor knows what he has to do about that.
How is the government regulating the markets?
You know, there are certain things put off. They deal definitely with market leaders to make sure. Like I was about the day before yesterday, I went to the market and I saw the leaders talking to the people, telling them what to do as per hygiene and a lot of other things. You see so many things placed in the market. You have wash and basins, and people are complying. And they also
That's
give time
in the
limits.
markets?
In some markets. I was there.
So these things, those guidelines, cannot be complied with in the churches?
You know, the point is, we just said a panel was set up to see the desirability or the possibility of being able to get that done in the churches.
All right.
They have to look at a lot of things to be able to achieve that.
All right. Well, we're not able to get back to Reverend Ogundeji, but we'll see how we can get in much later and get them to see what their views are. But we do thank you for coming on. Shola Ojeosi is a public affairs analyst. We will be back in just a moment. Let's read your comments when we come back.